this screen
I've switched recording on.
be organized here. Get my, and let's go to
17 November 40.
August.
So I'm hoping you can see everything that I'm going to do here. I wore a different color shirt today. I think it gives a little better contrast.
Dave, just out of curiosity, are you using the camera on your computer, or is that a separate camera to?
No, it's the camera on my iPad.
Oh, on your iPad. Okay.
Yeah, and you know, I have some computer issues with my iMac. I have one of the things I want to try out doing is I have a really good Canon digital camera that I can run what they call camera window, and I could set it up on that machine, except the internet speed where that machine is located out in our doghouse is really slow. And then I've had trouble with software. The software for the current model of camera I have doesn't run under the new iOS. So we have some computer issues to solve for me out there. But in the meantime, this seems to work reasonably well.
So
Yeah.
what I've done with the club account is I've switched a spotlight onto Dave, so it should force the screen onto Dave even when others talk.
Sounds good. So this is Christmas time. I'm missing my eggnog. So this is a candy cane pattern. I found this one on the web. It's basically a nymph pattern, a Czech nymph pattern. And I'll take that out and I will show you the basic hook. This is actually a partridge hook. I don't know where you get partridge hooks anymore, but I have a bunch. It's a Czech nymph hook. It's barbless and it's got, I don't know if you can see that, it's got a little bend in the point. It's kind of like a circle hook. It's quite a nice hook for nymphs. And when we did the woven Czech nymphs, that's the hook I used for that. So I'm going to put that in the vise and try and keep the least amount of shank buried in the vise that I can. Adjust this just a hair. I'm going to get that there. Okay, and then I'm using white thread because I don't want color bleed through with the body on this thing. It's a white body. So I'm just gonna, and the bead is one of those glass beads that has silver inside it, which makes it quite shiny. And I will start behind the bead just to get the thread attached. And then the next order of business is to tie in some very fine wire. And what I've got here is two kinds. I've got a green, got a copper, because I couldn't find the red. So I've taken a piece of green wire and I'm going to start it just behind the glass bead, tie it down. And then I'm going to hold the wire on the far side of the hook because I want the wire to be on the side of the hook when I get all the way down to the back. I'm going to try and get reasonably closely spaced wraps because I want the body to be even. That's one of the reasons why I'm starting the wire at the front and wrapping over it. And I'm going to wrap this right down and around the bend until you're almost wrapping horizontal. I'll bring my thread back up front. I'm going to take my little piece of copper wire and I'm going to do the same thing. And the reason I'm doing them in that order is when I wrap them, I want the copper wire to be in front of the green wire, or the red wire to be in front of the green wire. Same thing, wire on the far side of the hook, wrap it right down, to the end, right beside the green wire. I'm going to do a few more wraps, try and cover the underside of the hook shank with white thread. And that's again to keep the color of the wire underneath and from the color of the hook shank from bleeding through the white body. The next thing I have for the body is this acetate floss. It's white acetate floss, but you could use regular floss. We used to tie ice fishing flies with this acetate floss. You basically wrap the body with the acetate floss and then put a rib on it. And then you would dip it in a solvent for a couple of seconds, and it would cause the acetate to slightly melt and then form a nice hard body that sank like a brick. So I'm going to again start that just behind the bead. I'm going to wrap that right down the shank, again covering over the wires on the far side of the hook. Get right down to the back end, and then bring my thread up. And the next thing that happens is I'm just going to throw a half hitch right behind the bead. And that's because I'm going to use my rotary vise to make a nice even body to wrap this stuff. Okay, now I take my my floss, and the first wrap I'm going to go around the hook right at the back a couple of times to get a nice smooth start. You see this acetate tends to spread out a little bit, which is fine because I want it to overlap as I go up to make a smooth body. I have to miss the point of the hook every time I go by this way. Now I'm good. When I get right behind the bead, I get the bobbin rest out of the way, and 3 wraps behind, and then 3 wraps in front, and get in here and trim that off about as short as I can get. And then once more, I'm going to tie a half hitch behind the bead. And this is the fun part. I'm going to take both of these bits of wire, side by each, straighten them out. And then the first wrap I'm going to do right behind the white with my hands, once around. And then I'm going to hold this at about a 45-degree angle to the shank of the hook. And then I'm going to wrap it up the hook shank in fairly open spiral. Going behind the bead. And then same thing, get this wrapped off. So there's your candy cane body. And then to finish this off and hide up the crap behind the bead a little bit, I have a package of pseudo seal. Get that the right way around. Pseudo seal. I'm just going to take a little bit of this. This is pretty spiky dubbing, so I don't need a whole lot of it. I'm just going to wet my fingers a bit and wrap it nice and tight around the thread. Get it really good and snug around the thread. And I don't need much. You can see I've got maybe a couple inches. And I'm going to wrap right behind the bead a little green thorax. When I get to the end, I'm going to very quickly whip finish behind the thorax, or behind the bead. Snug it down and snip the thread. And I got a few little bits of stuff sticking out here. I'm just going to trim them off a bit. Kind of sticky out. This pseudo seal sticks out over the place. There we go. And that's him. Quick and dirty, fairly straightforward. And as you see, by having the side by side, you get that contrasting red and green color up the shank of the hook. But that's number one. So this won't take long. So now I've got a couple of those floating around. So the next one is similar idea. Now this one I actually looked up on the web, and it is called candy cane fly. And so what it consists of, the hook for this guy is a mustad streamer hook. It's about 3x long, stainless steel one. The tail is a rainbow crystal flash. The body is tinsel, silver, green, and red. The wing is actually rabbit foot, white rabbit foot, a little piece of that. And the collar is a red dyed saddle. And I had to go through my patch to find something that works pretty good. What you want is these barbules to be nice and soft. And I like this one's a little better than the one. These ones are a little on the long side. Just makes it flow a little better. And the bead is again one of those red glass beads. So I have a prepared hook. It has the bead on it already, so I don't have to wrestle with the bead. Debarbed the hook. With these mustad O'Shaughnessy or streamer hooks in stainless, they're quite brittle. So if you don't debarb before you tie, you run the risk of getting the fly all tied up and having the hook point break on you. This one has actually a micro barb on it, so it's actually fairly easy to crush it down. This guy I'm going to put right in the vise. There we go. Once again, white 8/0 thread. I'm going to start right behind the eye of the hook. And my scissors. Once again, I want to keep my body from getting a great big lump on it at the back where I tie stuff in. So I'm going to start everything from the front. So what this is rainbow crystal flash. And suck that through that hole. There you go. I haven't got this in the little package that I would normally like to have it in, so I don't want to get it all tangled up. Now I'm going to take, if you can see that, I'm going to take half a dozen strands maybe of that crystal flash. Trim it off. back, or you can put it back in the bag so it doesn't get all tangled. Then I'm going to take it and fold it around my thread and even up the tag ends so that the back ends are all nice and even. And then I'm going to tie it down on top of the hook and wrap over it with thread all the way down the hook shank. I'm going to stop where the barb used to be. And to keep that out of the way, I'm going to measure the tail to be about shank length long. Trim it off. I want those fibers to stand up and spread out, so I'm going to take them and pull them forward a little bit. And I'm going to do 3 or 4 thread wraps right in behind where I tied them on. And then stroke them back. And what that's going to do is that's going to stand them up a little bit, and it's going to spread them out. That's a little trick I learned with tying tails. Thread up to the front. And then, wherever I put it all, I'm going to take my, this is a, these are actually Mylar tinsel. To make it manageable, I'm going to start with a good length of it.
That's it. Same as Alina's. I didn't realize.
And these things, when they come off the spool, they have a little bit of a set to them in terms of curve. I'm just going to use my thumb and fingernail to try and take some of that curve out so it's flat. Just makes it a little easier to handle. And I'm going to start with the green. And once again, I'm going to start right behind the eye, the bead, right behind the bead. I'm going to wrap over it. And on the far side of the hook, again, this just makes it easy to start the first wrap if it's on the side of the hook and not on the front. I'm going to tie it right down to where the tail is. The advantage of having the tinsel long is I can put it in my material clip and it's now out of the way. Thread back up front. And I'm going to do the same thing with the red tinsel. That's Mylar. But this stuff has a tendency to unwrap. Don't want too much. There we go. Little spools have just a very small notch in them to get that stuff. So now I'm going to see how it's all curled up on me. To make it easier to handle, I'm just going to use that thumb up nail up against the soft flesh of my forefinger to take that spiral out. You'll see why in a sec. It's nice to do that. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this as I did with the green. Wrap it down the side of the hook. Right back to the same place. Right behind where the green is. Again, in the material clip. And now because I stretched those out, they're not curlicued back here. And that's going to be important when I tie the last bit of tinsel in, which is a number 12 Mylar. And this stuff is the one that has gold on one side and silver on the other. I'm going to get a good length of that. Well,
It's a pain because I never use the gold.
well, that's the way it comes. It comes with gold on one side and silver on the other. And if you tie it in right, you won't have a problem. So I'm going to trim that. And I'm going to trim, when I cut it, I'm going to cut it at a where I cut it at about a 45-degree angle to create a little bit of a point. Oh, it's still on. Right. And I'm going to tie this onto the near side of the hook with this little point facing down. Because what happens when I tie it, and I tie it with the old side facing me. Because what I want to do is when the first wrap happens, it's going to roll over and it's going to have that silver side out. So once I've done that, I'm going to just do a quick half hitch because everything else from here is going to be using the rotary. There's my bobbin rest. So now I got my first wrap over, and then I'm going to hold this tinsel away, and I'm going to do it with my hackle pliers because I found that if I do it with my hands, every once in a while I'll go and this tinsel will unravel all the way. And I'm going to wrap this down the hook shank in touching or slightly overwrapping turns. Part is when you get to where the point of the hook is, you have to go around the point each time. And you don't want to whack the point because sometimes if you whack the point too hard, it'll cause the tinsel to break. So when I get to the back, then I hold it at that almost 45-degree angle and wrap forward, and it will miss the hook point all the way up until I get behind the eye of the hook, the bead. Get that out of the way and tie off the tinsel. Now by taking those precautions in prepping the tinsel and tying it on and wrapping it at the right angle, you'll see I have absolutely no gaps in that tinsel. It's just, that body is nice and smooth and nice and silver. So that's what I want to do now. One more time, half hitch behind the bead, get my bobbin rest back, and I'm going to counter wrap the tinsel, the colors. So I'm going to wrap it the opposite direction. So I went this way and I'm going to go this way. Have it with my rotary hackle pliers. I don't lose control of it. And I'm going to make much more open wraps as I go up. I want a space in between that's big enough that I can make a wrap with this green tinsel in between. You can see there's a nice space there. Once over the top, a couple, 3 times. This is where being ambidextrous a little bit helps, but if you're wrapping with both hands, tying off with both hands, it makes life a lot simpler. Tinsel out of the way. And then another half hitch. Bobbin rest back. And again, I'll take the first wrap is going to go the same direction as what the last one did. I'm going to take the tinsel with my hackle pliers, make that first wrap. And then what I want to do is place that second wrap halfway between this red ones. So I just need to hold the tinsel off at the right angle to the shank to make that go in the gap. Fewer wraps, of course, than what you did with the silver, but the same number as what you did with the red. And then I'm gonna tie that off. Now you see I'm finishing these off right up tight against the bead. I don't want to make a wide tie-off point in behind the bead. I want to keep that fairly narrow because that's where I'm now going to put my wing. And the wing is this nice stiff short rabbit fur that comes off of a piece of a rabbit foot. And I'm going to pick about a half a gap width of that fur. I'm going to bring it right down, bring my scissors right down to the base of the foot here. I got as much length of that as I can. And when I got it trimmed off, I'm just going to give it a little, grab it by the tip and give it a little flap to get all the loose hairs out from underneath. And I'm going to put in my hair stacker. Blow in the hair stacker a little bit. Even them up. So now I got the tips even in the hair stacker. And you can see they're nice and even tips. And I'm going to give as much length to this wing as I can, coming back at least half of the tail length. I cut the tips off fairly short. And I'm going to put this down right behind the bead and loose wrap it. Once I get it on there, I'm going to play around with it to make sure it's right smack on top of the hook. You see, I didn't use a lot of hair, just fairly sparse. And I got some green bucktail. I'm just going to take a few strands of that, not too many, just add a hint of green to this. I'm going to do the same thing, cut it off. And that's pretty long, so I'm going to shorten it up a bit so I can fit it in my hair stacker. And again, into the hair stacker. Oh, sometimes these long bits I have to kind of even the tips up manually because they won't properly fit in the stacker. Get all the tips in there. The trick of blowing in the stacker helps loosen the hairs up. But it's more important in Alberta when in this time of year, the humidity is pretty low and you end up with hair with static sticking to everything. I'm just gonna give a quick wrap.
That's how it used to be. It rained this morning.
Rain. And I'm gonna wrap that down. And the last thing I'm gonna do is the same thing as I did with the mylar at the tail or the crystal flash at the tail. Is I'm gonna hold this thing up and I'm gonna put a good 5 or 6 wraps right in that V behind where the hair hits the tinsel. And the purpose of that is to cause that wing to stand up more and not collapse up against the shank of the hook. There we go. And then I need my feather. I'm going to strip all of the fuzz off the stem. So I have something to hold on to. And I'm going to decide, looking at this, how many fibers I want. I'm going to pull them gently back towards the back so that they stand out. And that's, you know, kind of double, maybe shank, gap width in a bit. I don't want too much red. Pull this forward. Then I'm going to tie this down, tip forward right behind the bead with the concave side up. Tie it down right behind the bead. Try and put it on top of the hook there. And I'm going to pull the tip towards me and wrap in front of it. That locks that stem in. And then I can trim this tip down right snug to the bead. Once again, wherever they went, hackle pliers. Going to hang on to this stem with the hackle pliers. I'm going to do this folded hackle technique where I'm going to take the concave side, make it face the back of the hook, and then I'm going to use my thumb and forefinger dampened to fold that hackle back around the stem of the feather. And then I'm going to wrap. And with each wrap, I'm going to make sure as I go under the hook as well as over the hook that the fibers are stroked backwards. And when I get to the front, I'm going to wrap good and snug over top of that. And then on top again. And then I can get in here and snip that stem out. And then just a couple more wraps to cinch that stem down again. And whip finish. Two wraps just because it's behind the bead to get nice and snug. And trim it off. And there you go. That's him. So another candy cane fly. Fairly sparse. I think that would be worth trying on as an actual fish catcher, I think.
You think the other one is purely decorative?
I don't think so. I think that might actually work on somebody that's looking for something that's really glitzy.
I mean, it's got red in it, right? Which is not a bad chironomid color.
Yep. Yeah. I'm thinking it would work on pinks as well. It's got lots of interest.
I'm sure that fly will actually catch fish. I remember watching a fishing show where these guys were fishing, I don't know whether it was northern Saskatchewan for pike, and one of the guys tied a huge massive fly using yellow polypropylene rope, and he caught fish on that. So if he could catch fish on that, you can catch fish on this.
Oh, I know all that. I know that pattern. And I actually have the polypropylene rope. I mean, you can actually make a pretty good hop with that polypropylene rope.
Yes, you would.
So that's it today.
Dave, I unfortunately have my 3-year-old grandson here, so I've been preoccupied off and on. The first fly you tied was with acetate floss. Did you
Yes.
melt it at the end?
No, I didn't. but
No.
you can do that. Like I was saying at the beginning, we did a lot of these acetate floss flies for fishing, ice fishing, for you know, the little worms, that silver worms that live under the ice. And you tie a whole variety of those up, and you just dump them in the acetate floss, and it would keep them from floating. They would sink like a stone, and they were hard. Yeah, and the ribbing material, would kind of sink into it, right? Yeah. I've tied a number. Wasn't a great ice fisherman. I mean, I don't mind cross country skiing in the winter, but cross country skiing out on the ice was nice. But drilling the hole made you sweat, and then you cooled down. And then I didn't have a tent, so I had to get a sleeping bag and lay down on the ice with a blanket over my head so you could see down the hole. That wasn't my favorite thing to do.
So about 15 or 20 years
It's much
ago,
more fun.
very popular to use acetate floss and melt after ribbing, then melt it with acetone for chironomids. And it kind of died out. I don't think I've seen it done in a long time.
Yeah, acetone, that's basically nail polish remover.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so that's, yeah, we used to do that, like I say, for ice fishing flies. I don't think I've ever used it for anything else.
It's almost like you have to melt it because that stuff is very fragile. It frays very easily.
Yeah, that with that double rib of wire, I think it would be fine. It will hold it together.
That probably will, yeah.
So that's it. Florin, you're on.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to do some easy flies. This was
Those were
the
easy.
advanced class. Now let's go back to the to beginner stuff. Okay. So here's what I'm gonna show you first is this thing. So it's a class of flies. They're called Christmas trees. They're a little different in the way they're constructed. This first one is the version that seems to be popular in Denmark and that part of the world. It seems to have originated in Denmark. And the version I'm going to tie, which seems to be the original version, is this one with the pearlescent mylar. And basically, I've seen people suggesting you can use anything you want and do a similar thing. So this is using a different tubing that I happen to have. So this kind of stuff in silver, it's called somewhere plastic canvas cord. I don't know what, I know what plastic means, I know what canvas means, I know what cord is. Plastic canvas cord put together is apparently this thing. And then I also had from ages ago, I used this for bodies on pike flies actually. But it's also a hollow core braided thing. And you can get this in a green version. So I think of the three, this looks probably the most Christmassy. Now all three variants are actually very simple flies to tie. So for the one with a mylar, you need an underbody because the underbody is going to show through the fly. That mylar is translucent, so it's going to show. So I use a size 8 hook, whatever you happen to have, something that's streamerish in shape, and red thread 6/0. Just attach the thread and begin with the underbody. In this case, I'm going to use some, I'm starting to build supplies for saltwater flies. So this is some hot pink, medium-sized chenille. I'm going to attach it here at the front of the hook. Then I'm going to pass the thread behind, and I'm going to start wrapping the chenille backwards over the thread. This is going to be my, and every now and then I can release this because otherwise it spins a little too much. Okay, so when I get to the tail end, get my thread back up and secure the chenille. Cut off the chenille, and now I have my underbody. Next step is to, and final almost, is to get the outer body, which is this mylar piping in pearl. And this thing comes in several sizes, medium, small, and large. Small is almost too skinny for this. If you do a different material for the underbody, you could use the small size. For this one, I think the medium size is more appropriate. Now the medium size is more than twice as thick as the small size. So now you want to first measure and cut this thing. So this is for tail, and then a wing in front, which you can do shorter or you can do longer, whichever way you like. So I'm just going to do a wing of about the same length as the tail, and then just cut this. It's not the mylar that's hard to cut, it's the core, which is this sort of ropey thing, okay, which is going to be discarded. So you pull that out. This goes into the trash. And you're left with a piece of tubing. Now this tubing is going to slide right over the hook. Here, I just have to make sure it doesn't get all tangled up. Wiggling a bit here and there helps with this. You get here to the back, and then grab, as you can see, the back end is already nicely frayed. Just gather those frayed ends in your left hand as well as you can. Make sure that there are no ugly tangles underneath the hook. And once you've got a grip on those, take the thread and secure at the end of the underbody you just tied. And that gives you the tail. Okay. Do a nice series of wraps here. You get a little band of red thread, as you can see. And then do a whip finish, either by hand, which is what I'm trying to do now, or if you have one of these extra large whip finish tools, use one of those. You want, the issue here is you want to reach at the back of the hook. All right, next, we're going to move to the front. So pull the mylar tubing towards the front a little bit to smooth it over the body. And then restart the thread. So this is a little bit more challenging because you're going to try to start the thread right on top of the mylar. So what I do is I grab the thread between my fingers, then I grab the mylar, and then I start wrapping. And sometimes it takes more than one attempt to get it right. And pull a little bit here to the front so you don't get a kind of a bulge here where you've tied the thread in. Again, do a few little wraps. And then to finish it off, just push back the fibers. So now this frays almost automatically. You don't have to put in any extra effort for fraying. I just pull back the fibers and just do a number of finishing wraps here, close to the eye of the hook. Build a little red head for the fly, and then whip finish. I usually like to do a couple of whip finishes. For extra safety, you can also use a little bit of head cement or nail polish. Okay, now this one here, I've tied the tail is a little bit on the long side, so I'm just going to go in and give it a short snip. Okay, this is a bit more satisfactory. And this is it. This is the fly. Okay, and the only thing that I found is kind of important. This is super easy. There's nothing really to it. But the only thing that I found is kind of important is to leave the thread hanging here at the back before you put the tubing on, so that it's a lot easier to wrap the thread over the tubing at the tail end. And I haven't figured out an easy way to do this same thing at the front. Okay, so this is fly number one. The second fly, also called a Christmas tree, is apparently a BC pattern. And it looks something like this. This is clearly much more of a Christmas tree than the other one, especially if you, I suppose if you did this, this is a pretty proper Christmas tree, right? Now the original pattern that I picked off the internet calls for Flashabou in green, blue, and silver. Now I don't have Flashabou in green, blue, and silver. That's on my shopping list. What I had was some Flashabou in these pearly colors, in yellow, opal, and I think the other one was called ice blue or something. And you get this sort of effect. This is a very shiny thing, and I have no idea if this is not a little excessive relative to the original. Okay. And so what I did instead is I had crystal flash in the required colors, and so I'm going to tie the fly with crystal flash. This is an even easier fly than the previous one. And the only difficulty here is to prepare the crystal flash. So what I do, I've tried a few versions of this, and I kind of settled in the end on the following. I take my crystal flash, which comes in these bundles, right, where they're held together by some loop of something. Then you have a bunch of fibers, right? And so I took out of each color about 4 strands, and I lay them on the table. Okay, so 4 strands of silver, 4 strands of blue, 4 strands of green, and kind of try to put them so that they're symmetric and they're all of even length, no ragged tips or anything. And then I did this a few times, and each bundle, then I took one of these clips and I secured it with a clip so they don't blow away. So now when I tie the fly, what I do is I take this and then I fold it several times until I get to the size of wing that I want. So before I do that, though, I need to take a hook and put some thread on it. So I have a hook. This is a size 6, Tiemco 200R. So again, any kind of streamerish hook is going to do, with a silver bead and some hot pink thread here, pretty thick stuff. This is the Danville 210 denier. And just start this thread. This is almost like a floss. It's really thick stuff. Okay, so I have my my thread here. And then I'm going to take this bundle of crystal flash, get rid of this clip, and cut here these ends so I can fold this thing. So look for the midpoint of the newly created bundle here. Okay, so that's about here. And then cut this as well. Now I've got a fairly nice and thick bundle of crystal flash fibers. And I'm going to start with the nicer end. You see at this end, all the tips are even. So I'm going to measure the wing from this side. So, you know, typical streamer type wing, you want to go back. Imagine if you had a little tail here, you want to go back behind the hook band plus the length of that tail. So you'd want it about this long. Okay, so you take this bundle and just secure it behind the eye. Okay, this will kind of spread itself out naturally around the hook a little bit, but the underside of the hook will be left completely bare. So what you do now is you take the remaining fibers, which are pointing forward, and you split them around a little bit and fold them back and down so that this whole mess now envelops your hook. Okay, so now I got it all folded back. I take my pink thread and I secure this whole thing in place. Okay. And then whip finish. Once, twice. Cut the thread, and now just give this thing a little bit of a haircut. So let's look back here. I have a bunch of fibers that have gone a little too far back. So I'm just going to trim. And that's the fly. Done. As I said, it's easy.
Laura and I have to go. I have an appointment, but thanks very much. That was enjoyable. And Merry Christmas
Merry Christmas to you too. Thank you.
and all the rest of you. Dave, thanks you to you too.
Merry Christmas, Vincent.
Yeah.
Very Merry Christmas, guys. I gotta go too. Thank you very much.
There's the real Christmas tree.
Yeah, well, there was a shortage of Christmas trees this year. That's kind of where I got the idea that, you know, didn't find a Christmas tree to buy, you can tie yourself a whole bunch of them.
I think, Flore, you need to have a huge hook so you can tie a massive Christmas tree.
I need a bigger hook. Actually, you know, I thought, you know, these little bamboo skewers.
Yeah.
I thought that if I tie a Christmas tree on the, this is a bit much, you know, but a little smaller, right? And then you can use the pointed part to just stick it in a cork and you got a beautiful little Christmas tree. Problem is, my vise doesn't take this, it's too thick. I have to try, not in this vise. I have to try a different vise, different jaws.
You can always get earring clips and make earrings for the ladies Christmas tree.
Yeah, I know.
Well, and
Or that,
anyway.
that Christmas tree fly might work really well on bull trout in the Athabasca.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah,
That's
they
what
would
I-
work very well.
Both of them, I think, might work.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of got excited with these flies, because I thought, ooh, I can fish these right away. I don't have to wait
You got her.
Move to the coast to use those.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, I hope everybody has a
Yeah.
happy Christmas. And we'll see you again on the 9th of January, when
Okay.
Dennis is going to do some more Klaxui flies. And I think the 12th is, or the following week, Don's going to show us some fly tying tools.
Okay.
Hey, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All the best. Have a good new year.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry
Uh,
Christmas.
Just before everyone disappears, I don't know if anyone's interested. This book, which is Stillwater Selections by Phil Rowley, who's in your neck of the woods, Florent and Dawn, I believe.
Yep.
He's got a number of chironomids that could easily pass as Christmas flies.
Oh, yeah.
There's one which is, it's got a black tail, but the red and gold and with the bead. He's got, actually, this is actually a great book. I really like it. Here's one with a green bead and a red body. This one is actually silver, no, glass beads rather. So it's actually quite a neat, a different design. And then this one is also glass beads and more pronounced. I'm not sure how well it's showing up on the screen, but there's a bunch of them. This one is a little more Christmassy in the one variation, which has the green and red with the ribbing and the gold bead. But it's these are all chironomids that he's tied and used and certainly caught fish with. So I wouldn't be surprised that the flies that you guys have tied, that especially you tied, Dave, would certainly work well for trout in a number of waters.
I was wondering, Barry wants me to pop round and pick up some bread. I was wondering what's a good time for you guys.
And come anytime now.
Yeah, I've just muted Colin. Okay, we're done, I guess.
Yep, thanks a lot.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey.
Have a wonderful
That's
Christmas
nice.
and New Year, and we'll see you.
See you guys next time.
Yep.
That was great. Bye now.